The year is 2018. Received an email from an address I never seen before as I was walking outside in my neighborhood. I thought, probably just spam, due to the heading, "Congratulations, you are one of the lucky winners in the competition." I placed my phone back into my pocket waiting for someone, I guess, but I can't remember it fully. Something about the email bothered me. I opened my email again and read through the whole thing, rethinking this might not be a scam. Listed my type of phone, my network provider, and an airline popular back then before they shut down. Then I realized that I entered a competition when I got my new phone, which I totally forgot about. I had to go to a store of my service provider to receive my prize, which felt awkward as the staff did not know what I was talking about, but a manager realized what it was about. All expenses paid holiday to a certain amount and anywhere I want to go, as long as it's listed on the website of the airline. Fast forward, I selected the places where I wanted to go. Everything got finalized in May 2019. The morning of our trip, mid-June, we went to the airport with an Uber and had breakfast at one of the restaurants. The problem? Well, our flight got delayed by 5 hours. A scheduled morning flight pushed back to the afternoon due to poor visibility due to fog. We arrived around 5 o'clock at our destination airport. Only a 2-hour flight, which felt like a breeze. Our shuttle driver collected us at the arrival section, and now we had to travel by car for 3 hours to our hotel. I arrived at the hotel, checked in, my room in the middle of the halfway, and my parents' room down the hallway around a bend. The first night was truly uneventful. We only had dinner and decided to get into bed early. The following morning, we decided to explore a bit, as this is more of a resort than just a plain hotel. In total, we stayed at the hotel for a week. The weird experiences began on the second to last evening. I was at the time a rough sleeper. I managed to fall asleep easily, but once 3 a.m. hits, I sit awake for an hour. I don't know what time this was, but I struggled to keep my eyes open as I saw a figure sitting on the couch of my bedroom. I could make out the outline of the person, but I can't see their face. 2 key things I remember about this figure. It was sitting like a woman, cross-legged, but wore a brim hat. My eyes are struggling to stay open. I lift my head. It does not want me to. I can't speak. Nothing is coming out of my mouth. My body decided to say, F, you go back to sleep. Woke up later in the morning, but nothing seemed out of place. But I can still remember what I saw. I just blew it off and went to breakfast with my parents. On our last evening at our hotel, I was already in bed watching the Women's Football World Cup on the TV. I fell asleep while watching, but in the middle of the match, I woke up with the TV playing no sound but still had visuals. Found this odd as I never turned down the volume. I fell back asleep, and when waking up again, the TV was off this time. What the fuck is going on here? My mind should have told me, OP, get the fuck up and just go to your parents. But why wake them up about something so stupid? 5 a.m. hits, and I wake up with the light on in my room. This is when I started to freak out a bit, as that part of the room light only goes on when there is motion movement when entering that room. I crawled out of my bedroom looking around to see if I could see someone and if my belongings were missing. Nothing was missing, and I walked back to my bed, and that is when my heart dropped down to my stomach. I did not sleep alone that night. Someone was in that bed with me. The bed cover was in such a way where they opened themselves and left it open. There was also a dent in the sheet on that side of the bed. I know at that time my dad was awake by then, since he never could sleep late. I called him and went to their room. They thought I was making that shit up. Once I told them both the story, they sent me to my room as we all got dressed for breakfast. Afterwards, I let them inside my room as they also noticed what I saw and both realized I was not making up the story. The rest of our trip, well, was pretty uneventful and nothing else happened. Once we got home and such, I noticed dark figures around the corners wherever I would go, like someone is following me. My parents joked about it with me and just said, "It's the lady from the hotel." That joke stuck for years and years afterwards that she is following me.
Earlier this year, I experienced what most people would describe as poltergeist activity that began with a string of rather mundane events. During the first occurrence, I was in a bookstore. I just so happened to be browsing the spiritual section when I noticed a book seemingly flying off the shelf on its own. I looked around to see if anyone had knocked it and found no one in my vicinity. I considered it might have fallen on its own, then replaced it on the shelf, thinking it might have been my imagination. Several weeks later, I woke up abruptly at 3 in the morning, which tends to be unusual for me, and just so happened to be reading a sort of spiritual text at this time, which I fell asleep next to. I was fully alert for a few moments. Then I suddenly heard what sounded like 4 very real knocks on my bedroom door when no one else was awake at that hour. I considered that in this situation, I could have hallucinated the event, so I eventually went back to sleep. After these 2 occurrences, nothing else would happen until months later, a day before my mother's birthday. This time happened to be the week of my grandfather's passing a little over a year prior. My mom communicated to me out of the blue that she saw a bag of toast fly off the counter. This was the first time in my memory that she had mentioned such a thing to me, and she appeared visibly startled as she didn't really know how to rationalize the event. We do not have critters in the home that could have moved it, and no carbon monoxide issues, etc. At this point, I was intrigued and began to wonder that I wasn't imagining the previous events. However, I was not altogether convinced that something strange was happening or that we were being haunted. It would be the next occurrence that really bewildered me. I haven't had a similar event happen before nor since. A few weeks after my mom's bag of toast incident, I once again awoke abruptly at 3 in the morning, this time to a loud and forceful bang. I ran upstairs to the second floor of the house, where I heard the bang to find that a pot of orchids I had recently gifted my mother for her birthday had been knocked from its spot atop the living room bookshelf and had landed on the floor a good distance from the shelf. I was utterly stunned. I ended up replacing all of the potting material that had spilled out onto the floor and putting the plant back on the shelf. But not before running through all the scenarios of why it toppled over. The pot had been sitting on a plate with a raised lip used to catch excess water. And curiously, when the pot had been found knocked to the floor, this water tray did not go with it at all. It hadn't moved an inch. No other objects on the shelf had fallen over with it. I resigned myself for that evening, simply photographed the incident for my sanity, and went back to sleep. What I found afterwards confused me even more. The next morning, I returned to the bookshelf to observe the plant and grapple with what occurred the night prior, when I suddenly noticed something I hadn't before. 2 rungs underneath the top shelf sat a fresh orchid blossom that appeared cleanly cut from the stem of the plant, tucked very randomly under a sheet of paper. The blossom wouldn't have just fallen to that spot on its own because it hadn't wilted, and it was well underneath the top rung of the shelf. Moreover, it being tucked under a sheet of paper completely ruled gravity out. Someone would have had to have deliberately placed it there, which seemed such an odd and random thing to do. I went around asking my family if they'd done anything, and long story short, they all didn't have a clue and gave me some weird looks. My mother is the only one in the house who tends to the houseplants, and she was none the wiser about it. No one else cared to touch the orchids or go near them, and neither would they deliberately cause damage to the plant, knowing I gifted it to her. The same pot of orchids has been sitting on the same shelf to this day, in the same position ever since, and hasn't ever fallen or been tampered with in a similar manner again. I'm well aware how staged and made up this sounds. And to this day, I still find it hard to rationalize how or why any of it really happened. I find it hard to believe that a discarnate being or force not only sent a pot forcefully flying, but plucked a flower off the plant and placed it on the bookshelf for me to find the next morning. But that is indeed what seems to have happened. The orchids were and still are my favorite flower, a sentimental object to me, and not a random one. Because of this, it seemed to me at the time that some intelligent presence knew this and made a point to knock them over and leave me a flower, knowing it would get my attention. I kept the flower afterwards, till it finally wilted days later. Whether or not it was a passed-on relative that did this is perhaps a different story and remains a mystery.
Okay, this happened a few years back when my daughter was around 1. Me and my ex were living in an old country house that she had inherited from her grandmother. It's a part of Europe where witchcraft is still considered to be common, and my ex used to visit a traditional white witch to make sure the evil eye was routinely removed. The house itself was an old villa, where both her elderly grandmother and her brother, who died of illness in his teens, had died in their beds within the previous 5 years, and my ex used to be low-key anxious about bad energy being in the house. I found that funny and teased her for it. As a rationalist, I never paid it much heed, till my daughter was born. I didn't want my daughter to be baptized, for ethical reasons. But as she approached her first birthday, she would start pointing to things in the house where my ex and I could see nothing. Sometimes I got a shivery feeling when around her at night, like there was something in the corner of the ceiling. And finally, when my parents were visiting around her first birthday, they would ask her typical questions like, "Where's Daddy? Where's Grandpa?" etc. Well, when they asked her where's Mama, my daughter started pointing towards the bookshelf to an old photo of my ex's grandmother. We thought that was weird enough, but after a few days of that, when she was asked again, suddenly my 1-year-old daughter pointed to the old photo and shouted, "Mama!" in an extremely deep, rough, raspy voice. It freaked the hell out of all of us. She kept doing it every time we asked where was Mama. My ex was so freaked out, she asked her usual white witch to come and remove the evil eye ASAP, and she arrived the next day and said some words to our daughter. The parish priest came the day after and did a blessing all around the house. My ex then organized a super fast baptism ceremony for the next weekend, whether I wanted it or not. After that, my daughter went back to normal. The pointing into space, the pointing at the old photo, the deep-voiced mama, and the general shivery feelings all went away. I never used to believe in things like this, but after this experience, I know there are things we can't always explain through reason and science alone.
Some years ago, my wife was caring for an elderly friend's mother during her final days. My wife has worked in care for many years, and as our friend's mother had advanced dementia, was entirely nonverbal and bedbound, the family needed some professional support to best help care for their mum. As such, it was arranged that my wife would stay at their mum's house from Friday afternoon to Sunday afternoon, as the family already took care of her around the clock during the week. As the family have known me since childhood, they were more than happy for me to stay there over the weekend as well, and for our daughter, who had just turned 2 at the time, to be there as well with my wife, as my wife took care of their mum, who was bedbound in the lounge downstairs. I knew the house well from my childhood, as it was right across the road from my friend's parents' house. As a family, we had the second double room upstairs for my daughter and I, and my wife split the night between our upstairs room and a camp bed downstairs next to her patient for her hourly checks, as she had alarms set throughout the night. My daughter would toddle around the house and ask questions about the lady my wife cared for, who my daughter ended up referring to as Nana Flo. My daughter had explored the house thoroughly with my wife and I, but one day we went upstairs to go to our room and she wouldn't cross the landing. She outright refused and began to cry. I picked her up and asked her what was wrong, and she told me she was very scared. I asked her why, and she said she felt frightened and sad upstairs, so we went back down and she seemed happier. At bedtime, I got her to sleep downstairs and carried her asleep up to bed. The following day, we went upstairs after breakfast to get her dressed, and she again wouldn't cross the landing. I asked her what was scaring her, and she pointed to the box room door. I asked her what she was pointing at, and she said, "The scary door." The door was exactly the same as all the other doors on the landing, dark brown, no detail other than the wood grain and a right-angled brass handle. I told her that there was nothing scary about the door and opened it to show her inside the room. It was a small room used for storing things Flo hadn't used in the years since she was bedbound. A chair, some board games, a couple of piles of her clothes, and a wooden rocking chair that used to be in the garden. I motioned for my daughter to join me in the room to show her that it wasn't scary, but she refused to enter and kept well back. I was beginning to wonder at this point, as she was always a very sunny, smiley little girl, so I asked her why she didn't like the door or the room. She said one word: died. I left the room, shut the door, and got her dressed. 2 weeks go by and she still won't go near the door, but I either hurry her past whilst talking animatedly to her or carrying her. Just to clarify, I wasn't scared myself. Unnerved, definitely. But my daughter clearly was, and as I didn't want her to be, we just tried our best to deal with those moments quickly. During one night, Flo slipped away in her sleep with my wife and her daughter next to her, holding her hand. We obviously didn't tell our daughter, as it would be a lot to process for a 2-year-old. I kept her upstairs, got her dressed, and packed our day bag as usual, and just got us ready to head downstairs and right out the front door so we didn't have to enter the lounge. As we got to the bottom of the stairs, Flo's adult daughter walked into the hall and saw us. Immediately seeing my daughter, she lit up and said hello to her in her cheeriest voice, considering the circumstances. My daughter suddenly took her hand and said, "Nana Flo is with the angels now." Her daughter just began crying and smiling quietly. We have no idea how she knew she'd passed. She'd passed maybe 3 hours previous, and my daughter and I had maybe been awake half an hour. What's more, we're not a particularly religious family. My wife and I were both baptized, but we don't really attend church. The first time my daughter attended church was 8 months later at a wedding, so we have no idea where she got the notion of angels from. That will honestly stay with me forever. The maddest thing is that when my daughter was born, she didn't cry. She was so calm. She also didn't cry on the ward afterwards with my wife, even though all the other babies were. One older nurse commented to my wife, "She's been here before that one maybe." My experience happened when I was 5. I was in the foster care system and scared and alone. My foster parents took me to meet my foster Nana Betty, who just was a beautiful, warm, loving person who made me feel safe and happy. I had a sleepover at her house, just her and me. I was in my special bedroom at Nana Betty's house, laying in bed, when a man came into my room to meet me. He too had a warm, beautiful feeling. We talked about the big black Labrador named Prince, the old little red bike I had given to me, his tool shed, and all sorts of stuff a little boy would like to talk about. He touched my cheek and tucked me in and said everything will be all right. As usual, I would climb into bed with Betty as soon as I woke up in the morning and waited for the paper boy's whistle long time ago. I asked Betty who the man was, and she insisted we were alone. I was insistent that I talk to him, and naturally she freaked out, thinking it was an intruder. I saw a picture of him on the mantelpiece and said, "That's him." He was Betty's late husband, and from that day she loved me so much that I still remember the love now that I am nearly 50. He looked and felt, because he touched my cheek, just like anyone else. He wasn't seen through like on TV, just a regular person. This is a true experience that I remember clearly nearly 45 years later. There is life after death, and it is beautiful. I hope my experience gives people hope. Thanks for reading.